Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Pradjana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Pradjana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajikacharya Ashtottara Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajikacharya Ashtottara Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. On this 24th day of March, 2025 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are on page 89, and the chapter is Contents of the Gita summarized, and text 22. Okay. So I'll have 3 men chant the verse, and 2 women. And probably chat online if we have. Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya Navan nigrinati naro parani Tata sharirani vihaya jirnani Anyani sangyati navani dehi Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya Navan nigrinati naro parani Tata sharirani vihaya jirnani Anyani sangyati navani dehi Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya Navani gunnati naro parani Tata sharirani vihaya jirnani Anyani sangyati navani dehi. Dharmaraj. Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya Navani gunnati naro parani Tata sharirani vihaya jirnani Anyani sangyati navani dehi. Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya Navani gunnati naro parani Tata sharirani vihaya jirnani Anyati sangyati navani dehi. Go ahead, Boo. Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya Navani gunnati naro parani Tata sharirani vihaya jirnani Anyani sangyati navani dehi. Anyone online? Chad?
Vasmasi jirnani yata vihaya
Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya
Navani granati naro parani
Navani gunnati naro parani
Tata sharirani vihaya jirnani
Tata sharirani vihaya jirnani
Anyani samyati navani dehi.
Anyani samyati navani dehi. Okay, I'm going to read the word by words. You can follow along silently. Vasangsi, garments. Jirnani, old and worn out. Yata, just as. Vihaya, giving up. Navani, new garments. Grinhati, does accept. Naraha, a man. Aparani, others. Tata, in the same way. Sharirani, bodies. Vihaya, giving up. Jirnani, old and useless. Anyani, different. Sangyati, verily accepts. Navani, new sets. Dehi, the embodied. Okay. Translation. Krishna says to Arjuna, as a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. Purport. Change of body by the atomic and individual soul is an accepted fact. Even the modern scientists who do not believe in the existence of the soul, but at the same time cannot explain the source of energy from the heart, have to accept continuous changes of body which appear from childhood to boyhood and from boyhood to youth and again from youth to old age. From old age, the change is transferred to another body. This has already been explained in a previous verse, 213. Transference of the atomic individual soul to another body is made possible by the grace of the Supersoul. The Supersoul fulfills the desire of the atomic soul as one friend fulfills the desire of another. The Vedas, like the Mundaka Upanishad, as well as the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, compare the soul and the Supersoul to two friendly birds sitting on the same tree. There's also a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam that describes the same analogy. One of the birds, the individual atomic soul, is eating the fruit of the tree. And the other bird, Krishna, is simply watching his friend. Of these two birds, although they are of the same quality, one is captivated by the fruits of the material tree, while the other is simply witnessing the activities of his friend. Krishna is the witnessing bird, and Arjuna is the eating bird. Although they are friends, one is still the master and the other is the servant. Forgetfulness of this relationship by the atomic soul is the cause of one's changing his position from one tree to another, or from one body to another. The jiva soul is struggling very hard on the tree of the material body, but as soon as he agrees to accept the other bird as the supreme spiritual master, as Arjuna agreed to do by voluntary surrender unto Krishna for instruction, the subordinate bird immediately becomes free from all lamentations. Both the Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.2 and the Shvetashvatara Upanishad 4.7 confirm this. Samane vrikshe purusho nimagno nishaya sochati muhyamanaha jushtam yada pashyat yanyam isham asya mahimanam iti viti shokaha. Although the two birds are in the same tree, the eating bird is fully engrossed with anxiety and moroseness as the enjoyer of the fruits of the tree. But if in some way or other he turns his face to his friend, the Lord, and knows his glories, at once the suffering bird becomes free from all anxieties. Close quote. Arjuna has now turned his face towards his eternal friend Krishna and is understanding the Bhagavad Gita from him. And thus, hearing from Krishna, he can understand the supreme glories of the Lord and be free from lamentation. Arjuna is advised herewith by the Lord not to lament for the bodily change of his old grandfather and his teacher. He should rather be happy to kill their bodies in the righteous fight so that they may be cleansed at once of all reactions from various bodily activities. One who lays down his life on the sacrificial altar or in the proper battlefield is at once cleansed of bodily reactions and promoted to a higher status of life. So there was no cause for Arjuna's lamentation. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So this is a very relatable analogy. We can easily understand it. Once we understand some of the previous verses in this chapter, especially text 13, where Krishna just describes something that we've been experiencing all our lives. Dehi nosmin yata dehe komaram yovanam jara tata dehantara prabdi dhiras tattanamuyati. So we can all, anyone can just reflect back when, say, we were 8 years old. Probably everyone in this room can remember something about when they were 8 years old. And obviously, we were all 8 years old at one time. And we had a different mind, we had a different body, smaller probably. And we had a different everything. I mean, there's some resemblance, obviously. But our body has obviously changed, and it's always changing. From day to day, it's hard to tell, but if someone hasn't seen you for 5 years, like a little child's growing up, said, "Oh, Bobby, you've grown so tall," you know. And the parents, of course, they can see that, but it's going in, they don't see it as graphically. So, and then the idea, and similarly, when the body finally gives out, the soul will continue in another body and start all over again, unless they become fully Krishna conscious. But the whole basis of Krishna consciousness, of even just the Vedic philosophy of yoga, is that we're not the body, we're soul, we're pure spirit in the body. The difference between sat and asat, right? Asato mam sadgamaya. Probably all of you know that, right? You learned as a child. I learned it actually before I even heard of Krishna consciousness. I was going to a yoga studio and they taught us that. So Prabhupada saw the word ma can mean not, but it can also be me. So my understanding is asato ma sadgamaya is like a prayer to the Lord, take me from the temporary to the eternal, right? And mrityu ma amitam gamaya, take me from the death to immortality. And tamasi ma jyotigama, take me from darkness to light, or from ignorance to knowledge. So it can be thought of as both ways. But Prabhupada usually gave it as an injunction, just like a first verse of sutra of the Vedanta Sutta. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. It's understood to be imperative. Now that you're a human being, you should inquire into the absolute truth. Don't waste your time in the asat, in search for the origin of everything. Where does everything come from? These questions need to arise, and they can only arise in the mind of a human being. The lower animals, they're absorbed in eating, sleeping, mating, defending. There's a nice verse some of you may know from the Hitopadesh. The name of the book is so encouraging. Instructions for your benefit, right? Hita Upadesh. So one of the verses talking about Dharma, because Dharma is a key factor. You may recall in this chapter a few verses back, Arjuna was saying, what is it? Karpanya dosho pahata sabhava prichami tvam dharma samuda cheta. I am bewildered about my real dharma. What is my duty in this situation? You see, he didn't want to kill his grandfather figure Bhishma Dev and Dronacharya, his teacher, and so many other relatives and friends. You know, he was recalling from that. But he knew inside that this means he has to give up his dharma of fighting. So he was in a quandary. And he sits down on a chariot. Govinda, I shall not fight. But then he surrenders to Krishna as a disciple, because they were friends. He was in a very intimate relationship, very advanced. But he was covered. Krishna covered him so that he would have all of these misgivings about fighting, so that the Gita could be spoken. You see. So in that verse, which has a key turn, because the first chapter and most of the beginning of the second chapter, he's giving this argument from the Vedas about why you shouldn't fight. If I fight and all these men are killed, the women will be unprotected, there'll be Varna Sankara, the offerings for the Pitas will be given up, I'll be responsible, I'll go to hell along with everyone else, forget it, I'm going to the forest, right? I'll do better but become a beggar. But he's not suited to that. You know, he's a Kshatriya, he's a great Kshatriya. So this is his quandary. But there, just to focus on the Dharma part, that he's bewildered about Dharma, and Dharma is so essential to be situated in Dharma. Because Dharma, as we know, is your constitutional position, really. As I always give the example, but you haven't heard it yet, or you have 10 times, you can read something else while I'm giving. The Dharma of a chair, right? We have some nice chairs, these we bought recently. And the Dharma of a chair, you sit down in a chair and you're supported, right? Now, I don't know if you've had this experience. I've had in my long life. You sit down in a chair and it collapses. It's not performing as Dharma. It's adharmic, right? So as living beings, we also have a Dharma, right? A Dharma. And the basic principle is to serve. Even in our illusory condition, we're still serving. We're serving the needs of the body. We may be serving our boss, our wife, our husband, whatever it is. That's our Dharma. But where to direct that service for our ultimate good and for the ultimate good of everyone? See, that's the question. So now, back to the Hitopadesh. So it is. I only know this one verse from the Hitopadesh. Ahara nidra bhayamaitanangcha samanya reta pashubi samana pashubi narana. Dharmo hitesham adhiko vishesho dharme nehina pashubi samana. So what is saying there that we share these basic bodily functions with the animals, with the lower animals: eating, sleeping, mating, defending, and fearing. You know. So those are base. So what distinguishes us from the animals? You know, oftentimes there's not much, and especially in Kali Yuga. But what should distinguish us, what we have is Dharma. Dharma hitesham adhiko vishesho. Dharma is the distinguishing quality that makes human beings superior to animals. But then, if it's dharma nehina, if you're not performing your actual Dharma, then pashubi samana. You're just a polished animal life. Dvi pada pashu, two-handed, you know, 2 feet, two-handed animals. So Dharma is so important, and this comes up again and again in the Srimad Bhagavatam. I always like to point to that. Srimad Bhagavatam is much larger work than Bhagavad Gita. It's 18,000 verses, or 18,000 granthas. I won't get into that, but it's much longer. But right near the beginning, second chapter of the first canto, the sages at Naimisharanya wanted to ask the question, what is that Dharma that can be performed so that the living entity can become completely happy, supersedity? So there's 18 or 19 verses in the second chapter, first canto, in which Sutta Goswami he answers that question. So the first answer is Savai Pungsam Paro Dharmo Yato Bhakti Adhokchade. So that's the first half of the verse. That's the first line. So that real dharma for the human being is that which engenders or the development of bhakti yoga, devotional service, to adhokshaja. Now every word is important. Why adhokshaja? This name of Krishna, of God, is often referred to in the beginning stage of devotional service. There's no Vrindavan Leela there, you know. What that word means is it's a combination of three words, Adha, Aksha, and Ja. So Ja is short for Janma, or generating. Aksha is the eyes, or all the senses. So that knowledge which is generated by our own senses and eyes and our conditioned mind, that's called Akshaja. But Krishna's Adha Akshaja, he pushes it down. In other words, he's transcendental to all that. And so this name Akshaja basically means the transcendent Lord who is beyond the range of our present material senses, mind, and intelligence. You see? So that means you have to have some faith, because you can't see with your own hands, you see. And therefore you need to come in contact with someone who can implant that faith in you. And Prabhupada, I listen to a lecture of his every morning, and he makes the point that this Bhagavad Gita, if you read it, and you read as it is, as it's given, as Krishna intended, then it's meant to engender faith in Krishna and in the process of devotional service. Because faith is the first step. Adha Shraddha. There's a nice formula. You know, what are the steps? Just like if you go to school, you'd probably like to know, okay, well, what do I need to do in the first 3 years to get the degree in the fourth year? So, okay, this is the course you have to go, and everything like that. So he gives this in his, I think, right near the beginning of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which we have as Nectar Devotion. He gives these two verses describing the step from just entering the house of Bhakti to graduating and go back to Godhead. So he says, Adhau Shraddha Tatak Sadhu Sangha Tabhajana Kriya Tato Anarta Nivritti Sat Tato Nishta Ruchistata Tata Sakti Tata Bhava Sadhu Prarabhave Bhave Krama Ata Sakti Tata Bhava Tata Prema Vyudanchati Sadhakanam Ayam Premna Prarabhave Bhave Krama. Krama means step by step. So he begins with Shraddha. Now this isn't firm faith. This is interest and a little bit of receptivity, you know, respect, Prabhupada gives it. Enough to bring you into the association of devotees, because then the next step is sadhu sangha. Adhau shraddha tatak sadhu sangha. And then, if you're fortunate and you take advantage of the good sadhu sangha, you want to start performing bhajan. I mean, oh, Prabhu, Amaraji, do you have any beads? No, you never chanted? Oh, let me show you how to chant. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So that's the beginning of your bhajan, right? And then there's so much other things. So then you, at a certain point, if you're doing the bhajan nicely, associating, you come to the point of what's the next step? Initiation. You need to become confirmed in a relationship with a bona fide spiritual master. It's a very important step. And then you kind of enter a new world, a new identity. You get a new name and so forth. You know, it's always very moving. I remember when I was initiated first. So then you continue your bhajan, and you're in the process of anarta nivritti, these removing unwanted things. And what are those unwanted things? These are all kinds of unwanted desires and tendencies and habits, misconceptions in the mind that we have cultivated over this life and many other lives. And the process is so powerful when you do it right. And oh, probably not on the floor. You could just put that. Yeah, there's some sacred. That's good. So anarta nivritti, the whole process. This is sadhana bhakti. When you're getting up early, attending the programs, chanting, and you're giving up the things you're supposed to give up, you know, meat eating, intoxication, gambling, illicit sex. And the hardest one is gambling. You know why? Because you may give me those other things, but when you're practicing Krishna consciousness, and you kind of say, well, you know, this isn't going to hurt me so much, you know, let me just read this, or let me do this, you know, and take a few extra hours. In other words, you kind of cut corners. You're gambling. You're gambling that it'll be okay, I'll be able to give it up, you know. But you never know when that end is coming. You know, there would be an earthquake right now, a serious one. We're sitting on a fault here. padam padam yadda padam, there's danger at every step. So that's a kind of a gamble. And that's why we're here. That's why we didn't go back to Godhead last time. Mostly if you're interested in this time in Krishna consciousness, you did some exposure in the previous life. Anyway, so that process of devotional service is an art and nivriti. Now when what did Prabhupada say? 70–80% pure, Then you're on the platform of nishta. This is it says irrevocable service, he says in the Bhagavatam verse. So in other words, you're committed. You know it's the truth, and you're just working on progressing as fast as you can. So then you come to the point of nishta. Now that's real faith. And Lord Chaitanya, he defined that in his instruction to Sanatana Goswami. He said, Shraddha Shabde Viswas Kohe Sudidha Nishtoy Krishna Bhakti Korle Sarva Karma Katahoy. That real Shraddha comes when you're perfectly convinced that just by practicing devotional service, all your aspirations in life will be fulfilled. You see? It's not that it's, I'm doing my bhakti now and then I'm going to do something else. No, you realize that bhakti can be integrated into every moment of your waking life. So then, now all along, there's something called ruchi. Now, and then that's the next step, ruchi stata. But it doesn't mean that ruchi isn't there in the early stages. There's some ruchi, otherwise it wouldn't come back. If you just come in and there's a beautiful kirtan, it's at Lord Chaitanya's appearance day or Krishna Janmashtami, and you may not be so familiar with it, but you've been chanting your 2 rounds a day, and trying to follow the principles and whatever. And then you get a taste. There's something, you get moved by it, because it's natural. Every living entity. So that ruchi, as that grows, that simultaneously your ruchi or attraction for material things wanes. And so then you get vairagya and vijaya. And that's the next verse. So he says, Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayat Yashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayira Hoitikam. By practicing devotional service to Vasudeva, which is another name for Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayati generates, again you have the generates, Ashu quickly, Vairagyam Jnanam Chayira Hoitikam. These 2 elements which are foundational to bhakti, which is detachment from material pleasures and things, and attachment to Krishna, which also is founded on knowledge. Because I like to give this example. Sorry, I have a certain battery of examples, but many of you are new, so you haven't heard him before. So we had a very nice devotee here. He was an old friend of mine from Brooklyn. When I joined in '73, he was there, and he was already like a 5-year devotee. He and his wife is still here, Kanchan Bala. Very, very wonderful devotee. She did all the artwork designing this Garuda, and it was actually carved elsewhere, but she's an artist. A very wonderful devotee. So they both joined in, 66, 67, like that, back in the early days. So he was been in the movement all these years, and he passed away a few years ago. So he spent many years in the movement, and he learned, his specialty was like strawberry sweet rice, which he would make basically once a year when we had Prabhupada's appearance day, Vyasa Puja. And a lot of the, any Prabhupada disciples, they would cook in the kitchen, make the feast. So he was, and it was like a dessert, so it would be one of the last preps that come. And we'd have time to get nice and cool in the cooler. So, so here they visualize the scene. This is to illustrate how gyan, or knowledge, can produce vairagya. You see? And so it's Vyasa Puja day, the afternoon is 2:30, it's time for the sweet rice to come out. So Madhusudan has been in the back making sure all the pots are ready, so we come back, we're sitting in lines and everyone's ready to serve out the sweet rice. And then he comes running in from back, says, "Oh, I'm sorry, Prabhu Mataji, oh, I'm so sorry. I put salt in instead of sugar this time." So knowing that, your growing thirst for the sweet rice is killed. So, okay, we're not going to have sweet rice this time. So similarly, when we learn how, say, let's just take meat eating. Now, I became a vegetarian before I even knew anything about Krishna consciousness, on the basis of health and things like that. That's a long story. But when you learn about the process of reincarnation and karma, and that kind of makes sense, I've been traveling through from boyhood to old age and going to so you're and if you perform sinful activity in this life, then you'll suffer for it, either this life or the next life. You know, that's just the way it is. But conversely, if you're very pious and you do, you know, kind, and then you get good karma. So knowing that, you know, I mean, we've known it all our lives, but we've kind of suppressed it. In my days, you know, I was just a regular meat eater, you know, until I was 22 or so. And I remember when I was a kid, I never liked, you know, we'd all sit down. This is a traditional family. We'd have dinner together, you know. And this is a traditional family, so it'd be the chicken. They'd have chicken tonight. But my father would have to cut the chicken. I was looking at, and you could see the body of the bird, you know, when I was a little kid. I said, I don't know, that poor bird, you know. So I had that. But then I didn't see that with the steaks and the hamburgers. You know, you don't see it, although it's some poor cow gave his body, his life. So, but when you know that, and also the other thing, that you know it's bad for you, it's bad for the environment, you see? So that knowledge can give you detachment. Said, okay, I'm just not going to eat any red meat anymore, you know, I'll just eat chicken, you know. That's it. But still, you're becoming detached. So knowledge is a foundation for real firm vairagya. And those two are like foundational to bhakti, because what the whole thing is to purify your desires, is purifying the heart. Cheto darpana marjanam, the very first words of the Shikshastika. So the best means of all is this chanting, you know, because you're directly in contact with Krishna. And Krishna, the very word, Krishna is attractive, he's all attractive. So he's attracting us away from the petty little temporary sense gratifications of this world. So that vairagya and vidya are foundational, and the knowledge is coming from Bhagavad Gita and from dissociation, and the detachment is coming from yourself and from Krishna in your heart, because he's giving you attraction for him and simultaneously abhorrence, you know, aversion for things that are bad. So back to our verse. So this is a very nice analogy, that it's just like, you know, I'm not in any illusions that I'm going to live to 100. I wouldn't want to live to 100. But I'm in my 78th year, you know, and I know that is not going to be all that many years. Although I must admit, because I have a very controlled diet, I take so many supplements, and, you know, I stand on my head. I actually don't stand on my head. There's a device where you don't have to, you know, stand, but to get the reversal and kind of keep the brain going. That's why I can remember all these shlokas, otherwise forget it. And sometimes, you know, forgetting them. So the point is knowing this and having experience in Krishna consciousness, and this wonderful verse is something that you can give to someone else, and they can say, yeah, that kind of makes some sense. You know, it's just like the body eventually falls. Let's not, you know, you don't have to, deny it. But as Krishna says, yeah, you're giving up the old body, but just like you give up an old coat. But then you get a new coat. Similarly, you get a new body, you see? And what determines that body, because karmana daivanetena jantu deho papatiye, that there are people watching. There's the demigods and so the super soul. So nothing is hidden, everything is remembered. We may forget, but that's in our record, some sin that we performed or some vicious activity we performed. And it all goes in, and it'll come out either in this body or in the next body. Conversely, if you do good for others, and what does Krishna say the best good that you can do? Give someone Krishna consciousness. You know, give them a book, or invite them, or give them the mantra. And then the power of that mantra, the holy name. What is that? Beautiful verse by Sanatana Goswami. He's glorifying the holy name at the beginning of his Brihad Bhagavatamrita. He's Jayati Jayati Namananda Rupam Murare Vidamita Nija Dharma Dhyana Pujari Yatnam Katamapitsa Kadatam Muktidam Pranam Yat Padamamamatamekam Jivanam Bhushanam Me. I don't know if you've ever heard that verse. He's got a whole bunch of verses. This is at the beginning of the... So what is all glories to the holy name of Murari. Murari is the name for Krishna, the enemy of the Mura demon, which is Ananda Rupam, the very form of bliss, because he's tasting it, you know, he's so pure. Vidamita, it causes one to give up one's material dharmas, material duties in Varnashram Dharma, and take on transcendental duties. Vidamita Nija Dharma, Dhyana, and meditation, and worship of the demigods, all of that seems insignificant once you taste the nectar of the name. If someone chants it even once, not even purely, but by accident or whatever, it can destroy so many lifetimes of karma. It's the power of the holy name. Padama Mamita Mekam is my supreme and sole nectar. Jivanam Bhushanam, my very life and my only ornament. He's saying like that. So these verses are many like that. So back to our verse. So this verse gives a very nice analogy of how we leave one body and take on another. And the whole point that he's speaking to this, on one level, he's just trying to tell Arjuna, look, Bhishma is very old, so is your teacher. They're going to go one way or another, but they're not dying. No one dies. He already said that in the Jayate Mriyate Vakadachan. And because I'm here, he doesn't say that explicitly, but because it's a sacred Kurukshetra, it's a Dharmic Kshetra, they're going to get promoted. They're going to get better lives. And Bhishma went back to Godhead, no question about it. Dronacharya probably also. So what's the problem? Don't be so absorbed in the temporary material body. See the larger picture, that you'll be doing the most important service. You'll be helping to reinstitute Dharma in this world, in the person of Yudhishthira. And you'll rule the kingdom, and I'll be here. And so your fighting is essential for the victory. And so he's asking him to do his duty. Now, Arjuna, he has all these questions, so we have the whole Gītā, and there's so much more involved. But the basic point is Krishna's speaking to us also. Not about, we're not going to fight on the battlefield, but don't be absorbed simply in the bodily concept of life, which is what happens. If you don't have the other instruction and the other examples, then you're going to, especially in this age, sink down into the modes of passion and ignorance and be completely concerned with these things, which are going to take you not high to a higher body, but probably, especially in this age, to a lower body, because there's sinful activities everywhere. So Krishna consciousness is the greatest gift, if only for the reason of giving us a way of life which is sinless and which we can continually cleanse our heart by the chanting. And even if we don't go back to Godhead in the next life, we'll go to a better situation to continue our practice. And hey, how long is the day of Brahma?
8.64 million.
Just got it down. 8.64 billion. Is it billion? Not trillion. Okay, billion. That's just one day. And that's how long the time passes before Krishna appears on this world. And it's been 5,000 years ago. Relatively speaking, just like that, right? And Lord Chaitanya is even only 500 years. So we're very fortunate. We're very fortunate. We have all the knowledge. We have the association, the beautiful temples, which Prabhupada worked so hard to establish. So, and who knows, I mean, if you read, I read this story because I try to keep abreast of what's going on. The climate change, climate change. So, as you probably know, things are getting warmer. It's warmer, and all that extra heat in the ocean is causing a lot of the energy going into the hurricanes and all this stuff. So one of the things it's doing is helping to melt Antarctica. And the Arctic is further along in that regard, but Antarctica, there's so many hundreds of billions of tons of ice there. But the heat of the oceans are warming up, and this is something I haven't read before, that there's a huge amount of methane that's frozen in there, but it's starting to come out in large quantities, which is like disastrous, because that's even worse than the carbon dioxide for cooling the heat down. And so, we've had a pretty cold winter, and the spring hasn't been so warm either, we just started. But some places in this world, it's been warmer than ever. And it can only, if it gets to be 80, 90, 100 degrees, I don't have any air conditioning. I'll just be like eating and sleeping here. We have some air conditioning. But you can only go so far with that. So the point is, everything is very tenuous. We don't know. When I was a kid, I was dreaming about atom bombs because they would show on the TV, the atom bomb, the tests they had, and everything. Very scary. And who's in charge of them? You know, doesn't that give you a little Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna? You got these demons who are in charge with the, you know, with the bus. And I'm telling you, there's a site. If you want to really get scared, there's one site on the internet that I discovered that gives you like 50 or 60 near misses where we almost had it. Yeah, you know, some famous some Russian guy who was working in, this was in the 70s or 60s, and he's in this monitoring computer screen. It couldn't be the 60s; it's too early. It's maybe early 80s or something. And it looked like that a missile had been launched, you know, from Europe, which means from NATO, you know, against the Soviet Union. And so his job was to call it in to the central defense thing, you know, and they would take it and then launch there, and then it would be all over. But he said, this doesn't make any sense, you know. So he double checked. He didn't call it in, and it turned out to be a computer glitch, you know. Now, many years later, in the early aughts or something, he was old, obviously pretty old by that time, they invited him over to America somewhere to give him a reward for saving the earth, saving billions of people. This is how tenuous it is. So really, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, that makes the most sense. You know, we have our little situation, I'm doing all right, you know, I got an apartment, we're good, you know. No, none of us are good in this world. It's very dangerous. Now, by the spread of Krishna consciousness, hopefully we can, you know, Krishna will save the earth. I always thought, you know, Prabhupada came to the West just at the right time and in the right place in order for the seed to actually fructify. You know, middle of the hippies. I mean, I lived through all that. And the Vietnam War and the AIDS and the LSD and everything had created a ferment in society, and there was a lot of search. And because of the drug, people thought they were seeing God, you know. So there was a lot of interest in people who had never even been religious, and how can I become God, and you know, like that. So those are the people who were responding to the first kirtans Prabhupada had in the famous storefront, and even on the Bowery, which is like, you know, up in a loft somewhere. So that you know, planting the seed, and the purification started to take place, and suddenly they're preaching and chanting and studying, you know. So that and also that Prabhupada came just at a time when they had liberalized the immigration, just like they're tightening it now, but they made it easier for him to stay and renew his visa so he could actually stay long. So Krishna made all those arrangements, and we're now, you know, enjoying the fruit of it, the books, the temples, the devotees, the kirtans, these festivals, everything, you know. All right, why don't we go on, unless there's some question about this verse. Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha, nachainam klediyantyapo, nashoshiyati marutaha. The soul can never be cut to pieces by any weapon, nor burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by the wind. Purport: all kinds of weapons, swords, flame weapons, rain weapons, tornado weapons, etc., are unable to kill the spirit soul. It appears that there were many kinds of weapons made of earth, water, air, ether, etc., in addition to the modern weapons of fire. Even the nuclear weapons of the modern age are classified as fire weapons, but formerly there were other weapons made of all different types of material elements. Fire weapons were counteracted by water weapons, which are now unknown to modern science, nor do modern scientists have knowledge of tornado weapons. In any case, the soul can never be cut into pieces or otherwise annihilated by any kind of weapon. The Mayavadi can't explain how the individual soul came into existence simply by ignorance and consequently became covered by the illusory energy. Nor was it ever possible to cut the individual souls from the original Supreme Soul. Rather, the individual souls are eternally separated parts of the Supreme Soul. Because they are atomic individual souls eternally, sanatan, they are prone to be covered by the illusory energy. And thus they become separated from the association of the Supreme Lord, just as the sparks of a fire, although one in quality with the fire, are prone to being extinguished when out of the fire. In the Varaha Purana, the living entities are described as separated parts and parcels of the Supreme. They are eternally so. According to the Bhagavad Gita also, So even after being liberated from illusion, the living entity remains a separate identity, as is evident from the teachings of the Lord to Arjuna. Arjuna became liberated by the knowledge received from Krishna, but he never became one with Krishna. So this is you'll find in Prabhupada's books periodically. He's counteracting the Mayavadis because they had a great influence then. They're still influential in certain quarters. This idea of oneness, merging, losing your identity. But Prabhupada would always quote this verse from the 10th canto. This is when Krishna's about to take birth in the dungeon there from Devaki. And the demigods come, and in hidden form they offer prayers to the demigods. Prabhupada would always quote this one. They're praying to Krishna, saying, Ye and ye arvindaksha vimukta maninas tvayasta baba avishuddha buddhaya aruha kritrena parang padang tata patantyado anadita yushmarangriya. You know that one? So they're glorifying the devotees, and in this, but there's others, ye anye, besides the devotees, O lotus-eyed Lord, of Arvindaksha, vimukta maninas, who think they're liberated. These are the impersonalists. But their intelligence is really not purified because they're averse to serving your lotus feet. So they have this idea that we're ultimately not persons, that the ultimate reality is the Brahman, the light, the effulgence, Brahma Jyoti, and that the perfection of life is to get free of birth, old age, disease, and death by giving up these material bodies and then merging into the Brahma Jyoti and just being there in this white light. And there's something called Brahmananda. There's bliss there, But it's described as just a drop compared to Premananda, loving Krishna. So what's the problem with this? So he describes it here. He says, after Kritrena, what an onomatopoeia is? An onomatopoeia is a word that sounds like what it means. They're very common, like splash. It sounds like if you have a splash, it'll sound like splash, right? Or boom is a word, There's many others. So Sanskrit has that also. So the word kritrena means very difficult austerities, It's not like amalakamalabhikakanda, this is kritrena, So by very austerities, denying oneself, going off to the Himalayas, sitting in the snow, and in the winter, then it's the summertime. Okay, let me go to the desert, and in other words, just to really mortify the body. We're not into that. By severe austerities, very few, can cut to the padam padam and actually experience that merging into the Brahmananda. But then, padam padam patantyado, they fall down from there, because they're averse to serving your lotus feet. Just imagine, I compare it to, you've heard it 10, 20 times. Did you ever hear of a sensory, what is it called? Deprivation chamber. The water, the water, I think it's probably salty so that you can float in there. And it's just the right temperature, very nice, it's quiet, maybe you got a little music playing or something, And you can just lie in there. Oh, I don't have to do anything, it's perfect, But then at a certain point you say, I got to get out of here. I got to go to work. I got to go home and feed my kids. I got to, In other words, you can't stay there because it's unnatural for the soul to just be in that oneness. We are persons. Just as Krishna is an eternal person, we're eternal persons. We've lost touch with our swarup, our actual eternal personality and form. So we're all going through this, and now we've come to the human form. So it's don't waste it. That's the idea. Because we can easily go down. I take a morning walk, and I go by and I see a beautiful lawn. Now, oftentimes it's astroturf in these days, especially around here. But sometimes it's a real lawn. And there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of little blades of grass there. And each one of them is a living entity, just like us. But somehow, through horrible activities, you come into... But they're not going to... They'll die, that blade of grass will die one day, and they'll come up to some flower, some kind of something. Up, and eventually come to the insects. This is what material life means. And all of these other species, the plants and the insects and the fish and birds and beasts, they don't have the intelligence to understand this. They're just absorbed by the imperatives of safety and reproduction and, all these things. So we don't want to waste it. Why, but the great part of Krishna consciousness is nothing is lost. That even a little advancement protects you from the most fearful type of danger, which is losing the human form of life. We'll be human beings, and if you've attended one class in Bhagavad Gita, well, next birth, when you get to the time, hey, it's Bhagavad Gita time, let's go to Gita classic. That's the way Krishna described it. There's no loss or diminution. Even a little advancement protects you from the most fearful danger. So that's encouraging. All these billionaires, I'm not going to name them, you know who they are, multi-billionaires, 100 billion, that is ridiculous. But they're going to leave it all behind. And how would you be, how would you like to, I got $400 billion, but then you become, everybody in the world hates you now, right? And they see your name, they see your car, they'll put a sticker on, a Nazi sticker or whatever. Would you like, is that worth it? I'd rather just come to Mangalarti and chant Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. All right, we have time for one more, then I'll give you a little poem. So this is describing now, this is especially suitable for the battlefield. In other words, you can't hurt the soul. And he's going through different things that hurt the body, but can't hurt the soul. Achedya yamadaya yam akledyo shosha evacha nityat sabhakatakstanu achaloyang sanatanaha. This individual soul is unbreakable and insoluble and can be neither burned nor dried. He is everlasting, present everywhere, unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. Purport. All these qualifications of the atomic soul definitely prove that the individual soul is eternally the atomic particle of the spirit whole, and he remains the same atom eternally without change. The theory of monism is very difficult to apply in this case because the individual soul is never expected to become one homogeneously. After liberation from material contamination, the atomic soul may prefer to remain as a spiritual spark in the effulgent rays of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the intelligent souls enter into the spiritual planets to associate with the Personality of Godhead. The word sarvagata, all-pervading, is significant because there is no doubt that living entities are all over God's creation. They live on the land, in the water, in the air, within the earth, and even within fire. The belief that they are sterilized in fire is not acceptable because it is clearly stated here that the soul cannot be burned by fire. Therefore, there is no doubt that there are living entities also in the sun planet with suitable bodies to live there. If the sun globe is uninhabited, then the word sarvagata, living everywhere, becomes meaningless. So, they're describing us, We are unbreakable, insoluble, can neither be burned nor dried, So it's very encouraging. All right, one more. Avyakto yam achinto yam avikaryo yamuchyate tasmad evam vidit vainam nanusojitamarhasi. It is said that the soul is invisible, inconceivable, and immutable. Knowing this, you should not grieve for the body. Purport. As described previously, the magnitude of the soul is so small for our material calculation that he cannot be seen even by the most powerful microscope. Therefore, he is invisible. As far as the soul's existence is concerned, no one can establish his existence experimentally beyond the proof of Shruti or Vedic wisdom. We have to accept this truth because there is no other source of understanding the existence of the soul, although it is a fact by perception. There are many things we have to accept solely on grounds of superior authority. No one can deny the existence of his father based upon the authority of his mother. There is no source of understanding the identity of the father except by the authority of the mother. Of course, after Prabhupada left this planet, they came up with this paternity. You can check the genes, but still, basically, this is true. In other words, the soul is inconceivable. Similarly, there's no source for understanding the soul except by studying the Vedas. In other words, the soul is inconceivable by human experimental knowledge. The soul is consciousness and conscious. That also is the statement of the Vedas. And we have to accept that. Unlike the bodily changes, there's no change in the soul. As eternally unchangeable, the soul remains atomic in comparison to the infinite Supreme Soul. The Supreme Soul is infinite, and the atomic soul is infinitesimal. Therefore, the infinitesimal soul, being unchangeable, can never become equal to the infinite soul, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This concept is repeated in the Vedas in different ways, just to confirm the stability of the conception of the soul. Repetition of something is necessary in order that we understand the matter thoroughly without error. So I'll just give you the definition of real mukti from the Bhagavatam, and then we'll have a little poem. Mukti hitvanyata rupam svarupena vivastati. Mukti is to give up all these other forms. Hitva anyata rupam. Well, even this one, as is illustrated, this one life, we have so many forms. What to speak of all the others? So they're not our eternal forms. They're just, we're passing through because of our karma and desires, you see. But there is something called a swarup. Swarup is our original eternal form, which is just suitable for us to engage in our rasa with Krishna, relationship with Krishna. It may be a friend of Krishna, maybe a girlfriend of Krishna, parent, could be a cow, you know. We could even be a flute, you know. This is Santa rasa. So, but everything in the spiritual world is fully conscious. That's why they have the kalpavriksha trees, Prabhupada pointed out. You can, you know, here you can go to an apple tree and say, "This is a very nice apple. Do you got any figs?" No, you can't get figs from an apple tree because it doesn't have the consciousness. You know, I mean, it's very rudimentary. So that's wonderful. It's a nice apple tree. But there you have kalpavriksha, so those trees are fully. Oh, you want mangoes? Yeah, we got mangoes. You know, just wait a minute. Let me, you know. So it's a different world. But so we want to try to rediscover our actual nature as spiritual beings. And that process is there here in the process of Bhakti Yoga. So I promised you a little poem. Let's see. Okay, here's one that you haven't heard in a while. This is a poem by Rupa Goswami. He's praying that the vision of Krishna's lotus feet will be, lotus face will eternally be planted in the lake of his heart. Smita ducha makadanda syandi bhaktraravindam tapapadapadahan san vishtagandham mukunda vidachita pashupali netra sarangarangam mamadidiyata dage sangamangi karotu. From the lotus of your face, dear Lord, trickles forth the luscious nectar of the beauty of your smile. Your exalted devotees, great swans, seek the fragrance of that lotus which does air their hearts beguile. Your beloved gopis' eyes, mad bees, taste the most exquisite pleasure in that lotus of your face. O my dear Mukunda Dev, I pray, may the lake of my poor heart be by that lotus ever graced. Hare Krishna. So you're all invited back tomorrow for Taco Tuesday. Special. Thank you all for coming.